That day I was home, I was asleep, my day off. My son came in and told me that a plane had crashed into the tower, the World Trade Center.
Actually, I was a new medic when that went down, and it was pretty intimidating because I'd seen it like everybody else on the news.
And we both said the same thing. Boy, that's gonna be some fire to fight that high.
I called my battalion, spoke to my lieutenant. His words to me were, "We're probably at war, get in any way you can."
They had lost 9 guys. 9 guys, our local firehouse. The same fire guys that were my heroes 11 years earlier.
The firemen that I worked with in 16 and 7 on East 29th Street, we had lost the entire truck company.
It's a wall falling down. Whenever I see the planes crash into the tower, I see that. This is beginning to bother me. This is beginning to bother me.
The men of 9/11 were men who did what men are supposed to do in the face of danger. They were men who went forward instead of pulling back. Men who took the initiative instead and were not passive. Men who stepped up. A columnist from the Wall Street Journal wrote about these men. Men are back, the columnist wrote. Masculine men.
Men who charge up the stairs in 100 pounds of gear and tell everyone else where to go to be safe. Men who are welders, who do construction. Men who are cops and firemen. They are, all of them, one way or another, the men who put out the fire.
I thought about, what am I going to do? Everyone's going to look up to me. I'm the paramedic. I've been trained in pre-hospital care. They're going to look at me and wonder and ask me questions and wonder, what am I going to do for them?
The difference between a trained firefighter in that situation and a civilian is the civilian may still do something heroic as people would look at it. The firefighter, we view it as our job. So regardless of what's taking place, we've been trained to be in dangerous situations. We are confident that our training will actually get us through.
I don't run from things. I don't. I'd rather face it and have you think the worst of me than think I couldn't face what I was supposed to face.
Until I started working for the fire department, I never thought I'd find something that I was meant to do. And I feel meant to do this.
You don't think of it at the time. It's just what, part of it's training, okay? And part of it's just an idea that this is what I gotta do. I gotta, not that I can make a difference, I'm gonna change the world or whatever, but I can change this scene. I can do something about this right now.
What we call courage or bravery, or you're still nervous, you're still apprehensive, but you do it anyway.
We're experiencing a new respect for old-fashioned masculinity, a new respect for physical courage, for strength, for a willingness to use both for the good of others.
When we talk about heroes, and typically that's always discussed, I don't think anybody who's currently working that was down at 9/11 in any capacity views themselves in anything of that light. The heroes are the ones that didn't actually come home. We were just doing our job.
If somebody's not going to take charge, I will. I mean, I don't know why, but I've always thought that maybe there's something that clicks that, not maybe we're taught, maybe just something that you inherited from a long line of people that, however, it's just that, okay, I can do this. I got this. We got this,
You don't have to be a fireman to be one of the manly men of September 11th. Those businessmen on Flight 93, which was supposed to hit Washington. The businessmen who found out what was happening to their country, said goodbye to the people they loved, snapped the cell phone shut and said, "Let's roll." Those were tough men. The ones who forced that plane down in Pennsylvania. They were tough, brave guys.
And of course, that selfless attitude that comes with the job. They did what they could. They went in, guns a-blazing.
Something that you learn from day one when you come to the firehouse is you have to step up. You have to take responsibility. Become selfless, not selfish.
It's about the guy laying there, or this woman that's having a baby, or this, or that, or the other thing. It's about that. It's not about you. If you got an ego in this business, swallow it. Not gonna do you any good. You can be a hero afterwards.
There is a legacy on this job, which I think really feeds into and speaks to manhood. You don't want to let your sibling, your relative, your father, your grandfather that went before you and did the job down. And I think that is going to be where the United States is going to draw the future from. Those men and women who step up, who want to do something great, and who want to make this country great.
It's hard to be a man.
The columnist wrote.
I'm certain of it. To be a man in this world is not easy. Good men suck it up and remain good-natured, constructive,
And helpful. Men don't run from the battle, they run toward it. They don't back down, they take initiative. They step up.
Most of us have grown up hearing the story of David and Goliath. We know about the young shepherd boy armed with his slingshot and 5 smooth stones. He faced off against a 10-foot tall warrior from Gath and dropped him with one well-placed shot. But do you know how David found himself doing battle in the Valley of Elah in the first place? Israel was at war against the Philistines. A battle line had been drawn between the two armies, and they were at a standoff. Every day, this giant of a man, Goliath, armored up, carrying a huge spear, would come right to the line of battle, and he would taunt the Israelites. Then he'd say, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we might fight together." Well, that's where David comes in. He was too young, just a boy, a shepherd boy really. He arrived at the encampment as his brothers and the other Israelite soldiers scattered. So David went to King Saul and said, "I'll go. Let me take him on." The king said to David, "That's crazy. You're just a boy." But David said, "Look, I've had to keep my sheep safe from bears and lions, and the same God who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." David's courage wasn't childish naivete. It was fueled by his bedrock faith in God, and he did what men who step up do. He took the initiative. He went to battle to defend not only his countrymen, but to defend the honor of the living God of Israel. And of course, you know how this story ended.
The thing that holds most men back are feelings. In fact, I see 3 kind of feelings that hold men back. The first is the feeling of passivity. Just fold your hands and go, "I just don't want to do it." Another one, though, that rivals that is the feeling of inadequacy. It's kind of like, I don't think I can do it, therefore I won't. And then the last is the feelings of fear. The fear that I'm afraid of trying that, or the fear of failure if I do try that. And those feelings are constantly at work in a man's life. And so what courage does is it seizes a principle, the principles of God's Word, and it says we're going to press into those feelings rather than give in to those feelings. And if I press hard enough and long enough, which is what I think men are called to do, that's courage in action, then they press through those feelings and principle triumphs.
How do you lead when the bullets are real, when you might be sending someone home in a body bag as opposed to an airplane? I faced that question on the very first day of combat. I was standing outside my command post, just watching the heat waves bouncing off the minarets of the mosque, 125 degrees outside. I was watching the Iraqi people just doing their thing. And then there are my tanks rolling out in the sector, and I'll just never forget, the time they were supposed to take over was 1400 or 2 p.m., and I glanced down at my watch to make sure everything's going all right. And just as I looked down, boom, a massive explosion erupts about 1.25 miles out. Smoke and fire build into this mushroom cloud about 250 feet high. Guys are talking all over each other, there's panicked voices. And the 3 letters that you never want to hear come across that radio. KIA, killed in action. First 4 minutes, I've lost my first soldier. I sprint down to my tank. My mind just swirling, going, oh my, I just lost somebody. It's also combined with, I'm about to get my first firefight. And as I'm going outside to the west gate, there's another tank coming in. The entire right side of that tank is decimated. And Sergeant Vallant's no longer inside the hatch. Now he's dead in the turret. And so as we're going out there, I'm praying. I was like, God, don't let fear get me. Don't let fear get me. I'm gonna have to step out of here. I've got to be courageous. They can't see that I'm afraid. You've got to give me strength. You've got to be here. And so for the rest of that day, like, God gave me not only courage, but energy to make it. Because we went all day, and we were getting shot at. Stuff was getting blown up. But the fear was gone. Several things that I learned about courage and taking initiative. One was that fear sometimes had power over me, taking initiative with my wife. When I want to shut down, when I want to be like, whatever. No. It takes courage. The only real difference is that there's actual bullets flying in the air. But the fear is the same. The heart race, kind of the adrenaline rush is the same as when I have to be vulnerable with my wife. Or when I have to approach conflict with another person. I don't want to approach conflict. I'm a people pleaser. I want people to like me. And so all of a sudden, I have to have that courage to take initiative, say, I'm going to risk the relationship. For the mission's sake, the kingdom must go forward, and I want what's best for you. Oh my gosh, those conversations are hard. I think that's been the transition. Different battlefield, same plan, same purpose.
I've interacted with many in the military who love the men that they work with, and they have sent them into positions where the issue wasn't termination of a job. It was a high probability, knowing the data of what they were asking that man or that platoon to do, that some or many would not come back alive. See, it's the dilemma of all leadership and why most of us want somebody else to lead.
It's time to recognize another inductee into the Unmanly Hall of Fame.
These strawberries, they're delicious.
You think so?
Oh, yes.
I may have handpicked them this morning.
Charles, you have outdone yourself.
Veronica, we've been dating for what? 5 years and...
3 months?
It's been the best 5 years and 3 months of my life. I just want to say thank you. And, well, there's a question I've been dying to ask you all night. Veronica, will you let me use your car this weekend? Yes, we did have plans to go to the symphony, but Ace got a killer deal on some tickets to the anime convention, and I may or may not have already designed my costume.
Yeah, you could come along. Sure, but how awkward would that be for you? Really, you'd be kind of be a third wheel.
And you know Ace just broke up with his girlfriend. He's gonna be a miserable wreck, and I can't turn him down. So I'll take that as a maybe. I may have to rethink my approach.
Congratulations, Charles McIndoe, for 5 years and 3 months of dating with no plan at all for marriage or a family. We salute you as the newest member of the Unmanly Hall of Fame.
I don't know what the most courageous thing I've ever done is. I know the one thing that was one of the hardest was the church was growing. It had exploded. It had grown to, I think, maybe 6,000, so it made it one of the largest, fastest growing churches in America in one of the least church cities. And in a conversation one night, it was just up in our bedroom on a couch, we were visiting, Grace and I were talking about past relationships and just kind of a casual conversation. And we'd been together at that point for, oh man, maybe 17, 18 years or something. I mean, we'd been together a while between dating and marriage. And she just explained to me a few occasions where she had been sexually assaulted, raped, and abused prior to my meeting her. And I just broke. I just started weeping, thinking that I had not known that about my wife. And she just said it matter-of-factly, like she was just reading the script of someone else's life. And there was no emotion in her, and I could tell she didn't even really understand what she had just explained. That sort of led to a season of me really getting to know her and her getting to know her past and us getting to know Jesus in a deeper way. And it was around that time I could just tell, like, she's going to need me available more, emotionally present more. We had just had our 5th child, so the timing is not great. We had just decided to go multi-site in video because we'd outgrown our location. And everybody's looking and all the critics are around and is this going to make it? And a couple of things combined in that season as well, overwork and stress and everything else. I fatigued my adrenal glands. I was in a bad place health-wise, was not sleeping. It was a pretty dark time for me. And I told Grace, I said, you know, for me to recover, for you to recover, for us to build our friendship, I feel like we're kind of at that watershed moment where our marriage is going to get better or it's going to get colder, and you've really opened yourself up, and I need to love and serve you better and pursue you more. I said, so I got to change the church. I mean, all the way down to I got to rewrite the Constitution, bylaws. I got to let some people go. I've got to put in place some hard performance reviews. I've got to be willing to lose a lot of relationships, endure criticism, preach less times, hand off more authority. And I said, I don't know if the church is going to make it, and I don't know if I'm going to make it. I told Grace, I said, I'm going to give it 1 year, and if it doesn't get fixed, I'm going to quit. Because you're more important to me than ministry, and I feel like if I quit right now, the church will probably die, and there's all these thousands of people that have met Jesus. I said, so we're either going to change it or I'm going to quit, but we're not going to do this forever, and you're my priority. And that led to everything that I feared, quite frankly. It was really brutal, and I couldn't tell the story at the time of, and here's why. Because Grace is really hurting, and I love her, and I'm broken, and we need to pull back and make some course corrections. Because it's Grace's story to tell, and she wasn't ready at that point to tell that story, and I had no right to tell that story for her. And so everybody got to speculate for years what the motive. Oh, he's power hungry, he's controlling, he wants to take over, he doesn't love people, you know, he's just a bully. It's like, no, actually he's broken and his wife is hurting, and the church is going to probably literally kill him or put him in the hospital, and his wife needs him right now, so he's got to make some adjustments. So, you know, in the grace of God, we weathered that storm.
We got married in 1981, April of 1981, and I was working in retail, sporting goods, managing a sporting goods store. I was going to work my way up, and I always told her, this next promotion, we'll get it, you know, just hang on. No, that's the great lie. There is the next move meant more responsibility, but all I saw was more dollars.
He came from, you know, his mom, born in Mexico, worked 2 jobs.
At the age of 5, my dad left, so it's just it was tough.
So then when we married, I knew that mealtime was going to be very important to us. And before we had our children, I was right there beside him working retail. But it was when we started having kids that I was at home and noticed, you know, the big void of him not being there.
And as you know, the greatest balancing act for every man is to figure out how to do work and home and make them both work well together, and I wasn't doing well. If I worked till a 6 o'clock shift, that was when I was supposed to get off. Maybe I came home at 7. And then if I closed the store, which was 9 o'clock, it was 10.
That's just too late to feed a family. I started to feel jealous. You know, there was a little bit of jealousy there. It's like, what's so attractive about work? Why can't you come home and be with me?
One of my lines was, hey, it's a man's world. You got to just understand that. So I would come home late, and she would heat up my dinner, and we'd have discussions, and it would get ugly. And one night, she wasn't talking, and I knew something was wrong, and I said, we're not going to have this conversation again. And she goes, no, we're not. But I am going to talk to our pastor tomorrow. For us, as a young Christian couple, attending church on Sunday regularly meant that I was in the faith and doing my job.
I remember thinking that our pastor needs to know. He needs to know, because I need help. The Lord just kept prodding me not to let that drop. And I was like, are you sure? I just don't want to go there again. And so I just said, yeah, I'm going to the pastor. I'm going to tell Tom.
I stayed up all night. I didn't even go to sleep. I sat in my chair and talked to God and thought I better figure this thing out. We're at breaking point. Something's got to give. What little I knew about talking to God, I did. And you know, it's one of those moments in your life when God goes, you're the one that needs a change.
Thinking back to that time, I think it was just so pivotal. Had I not confronted him and gone to the pastor, absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt, we'd be divorced today. There's no possible way that we would have stayed together. Our family would be destroyed.
I kind of knew this day was coming a little bit, and it was over time that God used her to show me that was sin in my life and I needed to change. In the morning when she got up, I said, why don't you come over here and sit down. So she sat next to me and I said, I've got a game plan. I remember thinking, this is going to take a lot of courage. I'm going to go to my supervisors. I said, I'm going to get Sundays off. I know both my assistants would like to rotate Sundays, and I gave him a plan, and he bought it. So I was afraid. I was definitely afraid. But what was cool is God honored that, and that was probably my courageous moment, is standing before my bosses and saying, I need to dial it back. We knew what we wanted to do. It was just getting there that was hard. We knew the ground we wanted to make up, and we knew we wanted to break that chain, and we were going to do things differently.
I asked basically these two questions. What were you written by God to say no to? And it doesn't matter what job you have, what world you're in, there will be something in your heart that says, and hear these words carefully, hell no. I will stand against hell in some arena and say, my life is being spent to say no to this kind of evil. But to do that well, you've also got to know what you want to say heaven yes. So clarify, perhaps over your 20s, what you're meant to say no to, what you're meant to say yes to. Now we can begin to do the hard work of saying what education, what careers will best enable you to be able to live out that no and yes.
With my sons, we'll have those teachable moments where you'll be able to sit down and say, son, you don't understand this right now. You don't understand why daddy is requiring this of you right now. But I want you to know something. One day, there's going to be a moment of difficulty, and there's going to be a wife and some children who all at the same time turn their eyes toward you, and you cannot fall apart when that happens.
We don't know a ton about Dietrich Bonhoeffer's last hours, but what we know is he was a faithful Christian to the end. In the 1930s, he wrote his famous book, The Cost of Discipleship, but he's probably most famous for his decision to get involved in the plot against Adolf Hitler. and it was not an easy decision for him. The Nazis were getting more and more powerful, and so many people were bamboozled by the complexity of the situation. It's very easy for us with hindsight to say, oh, I would have done this, or the church should have done this, but it was very complex, very difficult. Bonhoeffer was a man who simply wanted to do the will of God. He was the leader of an illegal seminary, an underground seminary of the Confessing Church. Those are the good guys who did not go along with the Nazified state church. He was not seeking to die. I think he would not make his decisions based on fear. He simply wanted to know, what would the Lord call me to do? And things were changing in Germany very dramatically, and Bonhoeffer was constantly asking the Lord to show him, now what do I do? Now what do I do? This was a time where when the SS gave orders to destroy synagogues, to burn synagogues. This was in 1938. He realized that this attack on the Jews was an attack directly on God himself and on the people of God. And innocent lives are being killed left and right, more and more and more and more and more. When do we say, I have to stop him with violence? I mean, you realize that Bonhoeffer was always thinking these things through logically, but Bonhoeffer also knew that the God of the Scripture is the God of the Scripture. And if he calls me to do something, who am I to even question it? There's a joy in obeying this God. If you're worshiping God, you know that he's exhorting you to act. He's exhorting you to take chances, as long as you're doing it unto him, as long as you're trying to obey him. Even if you make mistakes, it's okay. And Bonhoeffer saw lots of people in the church who were afraid. They were acting defensively, acting fearfully, and saying, well, I better not do this, better not do that. Bonhoeffer said, well, better to do something unto the Lord than just hide and just wait for this period to pass. And when the time came actually to get involved in the plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler, he did come to the conclusion that this was what God was calling him to do, and he took action. He was very bold, and he was all about action. And just around this time, he was arrested for his involvement in an operation to get 7 Jews out of Germany. That's a far cry from being involved in the plot to kill Hitler. Then once that plot was uncovered, of course, Bonhoeffer's days were numbered. Bonhoeffer always understood that there's a price you pay, that there's a risk. The difference between action and inaction simply has to do with faith. If you have robust faith in Jesus Christ, you're a different person than somebody who is merely religious. From the moment he really got serious about his faith, Bonhoeffer understood that to give my life to Christ is immediately to give it up, to give it away. So whether he takes it from me literally, whether I die, I'm already supposed to be dead to myself. That's the whole point of it. And so it gives you a strange freedom. You're free. In fact, we know that only about 18 hours before his death, he conducted a service. And this is just before the Gestapo knocks on the door, and they drove him a number of hours to Flossenburg. And at dawn on the morning of April 9th, 1945, he was hanged. Bonhoeffer had this really extraordinary, and I would say supernatural ability to hear what God was saying, to get the biblical perspective, and he was astoundingly resolute. And then he was a champion, a hero in being resolute, and not just for himself, but in how he dealt with other people, exhorting them to act, not just to say, well, this is interesting, let's have some more committee meetings, but to think it through to the bottom and then to act.
You know, at the essence of masculinity is initiative. When others were being passive, Dietrich Bonhoeffer stepped up. He gave the ultimate sacrifice, his life, and he was a courageous man. I think you and I are called to be courageous men as well. You know,
Over the years, I've spoken on this subject of men stepping up. And in fact, let me just show you something. This was given to me recently by a guy who came up at the end of one of my messages, and you could tell he'd been struck with the idea of stepping up. He writes, "I see myself sitting on the adolescent step, with my hands leaned back on the manhood step and my feet on the boyhood step, as if trying to crawl backwards. I can't even imagine ever being a patriarch." Here's the thing, there are a lot of guys today giving in to passivity, and they're sitting on one of those steps when they need to be stepping up. I want you to think about your relationships as a single man. Did you step up and initiate there, or were you passive? Maybe you're a husband and a father. Do you watch TV and go online and let your wife do the dishes and put the kids to bed? I want you to think about what you can initiate right now, where you can take the initiative as a man in either your relationships, your marriage, your family, or with your employer, to step up and be the man.